Good afternoon. Good afternoon. A very, very happy afternoon in our cold Gaborone, Botswana. And a happy, happy Mother's Day to all mommies across the globe. And of course, daddies playing the mom's role. We also say happy Mom's Day to you. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Joining us from whichever platform or whichever part of the world. Please let us know. Put it on the comment section. It's another beautiful podcast from the Happiness Tribe, your Sunday podcast partner, and your host, Miss Kim, and joined by our very awesome team, our very awesome ladies who are waiting for the gentleman to join us. So I will just pass the mic to our today's moderator, Dr. Gladys. Over to you.
Good day and happy Mother's Day to everyone out there. And like you said, Miss Kim, as well as the dads who also fill in for that role too. I'm Dr. Gladys Spalding. I'm a part of the Happiness Tribe. Very happy to be a part of this tribe with these women who are just brilliant women. We learn so much from each other. I'm looking so forward to this conversation today. This is actually representing my chapter in the book that has to do with resilience. A much needed topic. I think that this topic is something that goes on forever. It's not something that's just limited to a certain time, because I think in life we all experience a time where we should be resilient or could be resilient. So looking forward to this. So I'll pass the mic to Miss Yodet.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. Hello, Miss Kim, and hello to all our listeners out there. And Miss Paula, I know Miss Paula was on stage. I think she's still there. It's a great afternoon here in Gaborone, and we are starting an hour later than our usual time. And hopefully, this will work for more people so that we have more guests joining us. Today is a very interesting subject, and it's going to be interesting to listen to Dr. Gladys and her experience with this. But I also I gave some thought to the fact that we're discussing this subject on Mother's Day, and I think if there is someone in our lives who is resilient, whether it's emotional resilience or anything else, it's our mothers, simply because of everything that they have to deal with. And in this part of the world where we have a lot of mothers raising children on their own, there's a special kind of resilience that they must have. Oops, sorry about that. My apologies. That they must have to be able to manage households, attend to work, etc. So, a very special happy Mother's Day to everyone, all the mothers who've joined us today, whether you've birthed them for yourself or you're mothering other people's children because that's what you are, a good mother. Welcome to the show. And I'm excited for many reasons to be discussing this subject, and a very proud member of the Happiness Tribe. Thank you. Is Ms. Paula on the line? So I can hand over to Ms. Paula. Okay, then maybe I hand it back over to you, Dr. Gladys.
Sure. So I miss Miss Paula. Come back if you hear us. However, so today the topic, like I mentioned, it has to do with resilience. And one thing I want to say is that the definition of resilience is basically if you have the ability to adapt well, and recover somewhat rapidly, from a stressful situation. From it could be adversity. It could be trauma or any type of challenge. And my particular example focuses on is job related. That's basically what my chapter focuses on. And it also means, we talk about resilience. It means like bouncing, back from a difficult experience and, continuing to grow and to function despite, experiencing that particular type of hardship. So it can apply to, resilience can apply to individuals. It can apply to communities. It can even apply to ecosystems, but like I said, my example is more related to the workplace. So that gives you an idea of what, how we define resilience and some examples where, there could be a need for resilience. Okay, so I'll let Ms. Paula's back, so I'll let her go ahead.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you to the family. Thank you to everyone who's visiting us now and even later. I am Miss Paula. I'm hailing from Belize. I'm a member of the Happiness Tribe. And it's just an honor to be here to discuss this whole concept of resilience, something that I believe all of us can really, really appreciate a healthy dose of in these times of change. Dr. Gladys was just to follow up on her point that resilience really is the key to not just surviving these stressful times that we're in, but actually to find a way to thrive during these challenges that we're in. So I appreciate it. I think it's an absolute blessing. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all so much. Am I still on? I'm sorry.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay. I apologize. So, Dr. Gladys, you were speaking about what are the toughest moments in life. Can I give a quick little story, or can we get back to that? There's something I'd like to share when we really get the conversation going. I can go ahead.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just wanted to share with the audience some of my experience. I have a child. My last child, the baby of the bunch, was born with sickle cell anemia. And from the time of his birth, he was diagnosed with sickle cell at 5 months old. And so it is my experience with this young man, from a baby until he was 33 years old when he finally left home, that really has cultivated the woman that I am today, in this concept of no matter how bad things get, no matter how impossible things look, that it ultimately turns out for good. Even if we're not necessarily happy with the outcome, it's actually for our highest and best good. So I sort of want to, we're gonna get into the conversation about this a little more, and there are things that I'd like to share. But if you're someone in this world that's taking care of other people, have a sick child, have a sick parent, for a lot of us these days, the concept of resilience and how we build that is what this conversation is about. Right. I missed part of the introduction, Dr. Gladys, so I don't know how far along we are, because my technology is trying to catch up. But for anyone that's going through some circumstance, some situation, you lost your job, the relationship you had for 40 years or 20 years is not working anymore. Resilience, really building your internal resilience, is the way to not just get through everything, but to actually win at the end of all of that. I'll stop now for that moment, but I will pass the mic on back to Dr. Gladys. Thank you.
Ms. Kim, did you have something you would like to say? I'm not sure if she can hear me. Can you hear me, Ms. Kim? I don't think she can hear me. Okay. Well, let me just say that I also would like to say to mention that resilience has to deal with mental strength, and the ability to actually manage your emotions when you're actually in a situation. So, and I know when you're in these situations, especially, in my case, I was being attacked at my job by, an entire cohort of individuals. Basically, I'm in the biology department. And at that time, I was being attacked by the majority of those individuals. And it was very difficult in the sense, I was able to manage my emotions. I have to say that it was actually divine. Because, a lot of times when you're in these situations, people will tell you what they would do. But to be honest with you, nobody knows what they will do until they're actually in that situation. Now, I could not tell you at that time, prior to that happening to me, that this is how I'm going to handle it. I had no idea. I learned as I was going, while I was on the journey, so I have to say, when I look back now, I'm very proud of the way I handled it. Because I stayed professional. And the main thing was that I continued to do my job. And I think when you show up and do what you're supposed to do, I think that really makes it easier for you. But, there's a lot of components to it. And as far as getting emotional, my emotions took place outside the job because I was really concerned about losing my job. So I thank God I had a support system where I had, my husband, I had my mom, and I had some friends who were very supportive. However, although they were not there, me sharing, this information, they were able to even, refer me to people who could assist me with it. It wasn't always successful, but at least they were trying to assist me in the process. And but I do want to say, I was concerned about losing my job because usually, there's a saying that when the numbers are against you, more than likely you're going to lose. But here's the thing, I'm a very spiritual person. But when you believe, in yourself and you have, I just want to say whatever you want to call it, God or whatever that is, it's you're out that those individuals are outnumbered. And especially if you're doing what you're supposed to do. Now I don't want to go too deep into it because I know you may have some questions, Miss Paula. So I just want to stop right there. And then, Miss Yodi, if you have something to say or if you have another question, Miss Paula, I would be more than happy to answer.
Sister Yodit, can I ask this question?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
So I'm familiar with the story, Dr. Gladys. We don't want to give anything away, but I know you were going through some stuff, to your point, in the fear of losing your job because there were people that were really organized, if I may, against you for whatever reason.
Right.
My question to you is, when you were in the middle of going through this circumstance and situation, what was it that made you feel like or decided how you handle the situation? Like, what came to you? What were you thinking? Like, I don't want to make this worse. I don't want to come across as the person who's an angry Black woman. What was it that made you keep your composure during this trialing situation?
That is a great question. I really believe that first of all, I'm not an angry Black woman. That's the first thing. I just want to mention that. I'm just not an angry Black woman. No, that's the first thing. So that really wasn't an issue. But I think by speaking with, my support system, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So, I didn't have an issue with time. I didn't have an issue with doing my job. I was very competent. I had history. But I think at some point, because I did want to quit, I'm not going to lie to you, because it's very stressful. But at some point I said, hold up, if you don't see it to the end, you'll never know what the outcome will be if you give up. So I decided, even if I get fired and I'm not victorious, at least I know I tried. So at some point, that's what came into my head, because I noticed that a lot of times people will just give up before they know the ending. So I had decided I'm in for the fight now, and that took a while. That was not immediate. I just want to say there were those thoughts where I wanted to quit. I'm not going to lie to you. But, like I said, my support system was very supportive, and they encouraged me to stay because they knew I hadn't done anything wrong, So, so I hope that answers your question there.
It does. Thank you so much. It does.
Okay, if I may jump in here, Dr. Gladys, thank you for sharing. So a couple of thoughts. Sometimes when we're going through something very difficult, the shock of what we're going through makes us freeze. I don't know if that's the right term, where you it's an automatic wall that goes up to shield yourself from any negative feelings or just to protect yourself. So I wanted to know, how much does the shock factor, or did the shock factor, or how much did that factor into your response? Did you use that at all? Because sometimes it allows us to almost float through a situation, because you put down that wall and you just deal with whatever comes through. So that's the first question, just to see, whether or not that was a part of what you went through. And then the second question is, what are some of what we would think, or other people would think, are little things that you did throughout the day to protect yourself from the negativity? You see somebody who triggers you, or you get an email that triggers you. What are some of the things that you did to help
Okay.
yourself get through those days.
Great. Now, to your first question, I have to say, I was just totally shocked. Because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So the shock factor, once I saw what was going on, I was totally in shock because I knew I didn't do anything wrong. And then, I experienced the shock. And then, like I said, I went through the emotions of, well, let me continue to do my job. Right. And then maybe things will change, and they didn't change. They were magnified. Things got worse. Okay. So at that point, that's when, like I said, I looked to my support system and I realized, look, I'm not doing anything wrong. I even had the paperwork to show everything, that I was doing. And like I said, I had the history. I had been there at least a little over a year prior to the individual who initiated this thing. So I already had history, and then people knew who I was. Now those who you can always bring people on board, even though they know you, and for whatever reason, I don't know if she offered them something, and I probably just wasn't a good fit for her. Some people just don't like you. You don't have to do anything wrong. At that time, I didn't think about it like that, but I realized that later, and through my experiences, I see that. I may not have fit her agenda, whatever that is. Now, some of the things that I did do, I made sure I stayed focused. I made sure I dotted every I crossed every T. And when I say that, I'm talking about if I had a one-on-one conversation with any of those individuals that were involved, I would follow up with an email. I would always say, as per our conversation, you said so and so. So I was covering my bases. I made sure I documented everything. I was using my cell phone to take pictures. So I was covering myself. I know that's a lot to do. That is a lot, because think about it. Instead of being able to do my job, I'm consumed with trying to protect myself. So it really does affect not just you, but all of the individuals that are involved, because I had a job to do. So I'm spending time doing things that I wouldn't normally have to do. So those are some of the things that I had to implement, making sure I recorded conversation, making sure I always kept my invoices whenever I placed orders and stuff like that. So I had to keep up with all of those things. At one point, there was a situation where the individual was trying to say that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And let me tell you something. Something told me when I returned from vacation, this was after the holiday vacation, Christmas time, something told me to just keep swiping your card because there's a record when you swipe. Let me tell you something. I was swiping like crazy. Don't even know why. Like I said, there was a lot of divine situations here. I really mean that. And I swiped, and she had to recant that statement because she could not prove, because I had been swiping. So it's about being obedient, listening to your intuition. You see what I'm saying? And making sure you cover and doing your job. A lot of people, they get in these situations on the job because they don't show up on time. I don't have a problem with tardiness. I'm an early person. I get there early. Okay. Also, doing my job. I wasn't the type that really socialized on the job a lot. I was there to do a job because I knew that I was trying to get my paycheck, So I didn't have those type of issues. So, and then once an individual starts to lie on you, it snowballs, right? And then after a while, they trip over themselves. And let me tell you something. I started seeing this individual tripping over themselves. Yeah. So those are just some of the things.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. And I think one of the reasons I'm happy we're having this conversation, and I hope there are a lot of young people who either are listening in now or will listen, because I think it's important to start building emotional resilience from when you're young, and not in a way where you're shutting everything off and you yourself become a different human being, but where you're able to grow from it. And the reason I say this is because sometimes you learn emotional resilience when you're much older and you wish you had it when you were young, especially, when you've just joined a new workplace. And it doesn't really matter what sector you're in, because you have people who are just difficult everywhere.
Yeah.
So hopefully they are listening in, some of the little things that you do, listening to your intuition. Some of us will also call it, my guardian angel. Something is whispering to you
Yes.
consistently. But is there, how else can we describe that? So we guide our young people to listen to the other thing they may also call it is your gut instinct. What is that? Dr. Gladys, I know Ms. Paula can also speak to this, but if I can pose the question to both of you, what is that gut instinct, our guardian angels, that we need to learn to listen to attentively?
Miss Paula, I'll let you speak. Go ahead. I already spoke.
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question, Sister Yoda. Your gut instinct is that knowing. It's an inner knowing that has no rationale to it. It's like knowing something even when the external world is telling you that this knowing that you're feeling, this gut instinct, that's when the world goes south, everything outside is pointing to a different direction or explanation. And your gut instinct is telling you something totally different. That is that knowing. It's an inner knowing that's not based on rationale. It's not based on circumstances. It isn't based on any of those things. It's just a knowing. It's an inner instinct. And I had that. I had that when my son was a baby. He was I took him forward to his pediatrician. You know, you have to get the follow up after you have the baby, the first month, and then 2 months after that we had to go. So at 5 months, my child was up. I needed to take him to the pediatrician for just a regular routine follow up. But I'd noticed something. At 5 months, my baby was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. That's not normal. And I knew that because I had other children. I had 3 other children. So when I took him to the clinic to see the pediatrician and they examined him, everything looked normal. He was the size he needed to be. He was healthy looking. He was laughing and he just looked like a healthy whole child. But because he was sleeping up to 18 hours a day and I had this gnawing, to your point, Sister Yoda, trying to answer your question, I had this feeling inside that something just wasn't quite right with him. He wasn't crying or anything. He was just a beautiful baby, but something just didn't sit right with me. So when I took him for his 5-month checkup, and the pediatrician looked at him, they did the measurements, his height, his weight, all of that stuff, everything looked good. The one thing she didn't do was she didn't run any kind of blood test. I didn't know this then, that was not standard procedure unless there was good reason for her to run the blood test. I'm telling you, I've got to tell you all, it was at the end of the evening, I had an afternoon thing. I refused to leave the clinic because I was insistent to the pediatrician, I need you to run some kind of blood test or something on my baby. Something is not right. He's sleeping too long. Babies at this stage are highly evolved. They're moving, they're laughing, they're playing. They sleep a lot, but not for up to 18 hours a day. Something is wrong. And she treated me like I had lost my mind. And I mean, I clowned. I have to be honest. This gut feeling was so strong in me that I couldn't let it go. Anyway, to get to the short story, the security came. And I made it clear that I was not going to leave and I wasn't taking the baby unless she ran this one test, run a blood test. Cut a long story short, they ran the blood test before I even was told or called in. When the doctor came in to see me, when I looked up, there was the EMS, the ambulances, there were nurses and doctors. There was just, the activity was so crazy. And it wasn't until she had to come in and speak to me a few minutes later when she said, she apologized. And she said to me, you are a great mother, because everything that I'm looking at for the things we needed to explore or the stuff that we're looking at for the baby came across as normal. But when you insisted to run the blood test, and she apologized profusely. When they ran the blood test, my baby's hemoglobin was a 5. He had a 5. A normal hemoglobin is 12. The red blood cells is a 12. His was down to 5. So he was sickling all along and he was desperately sick. They rushed us to Children's Hospital in Los Angeles and rushed him. When we arrived at the hospital, there were all these specialties that were in the emergency room bay with an incubator waiting on my baby. Had I not been insistent and followed that gut, he would have been dead. So for me, that has become such a profound lesson for me. So when I have an instinct, I don't care what anything else looks like around me in the external environment. If my instinct is telling me you're not safe, something is wrong, I do something about it. Thank you. That's a great question, Dr. Gladys.
Okay. Well, yeah. So what I would like to say is that it's definitely a feeling. And, I like in my case, I was obedient to that feeling. And, I just want to say I really don't think I had much of a choice because the odds were against me. And because I was actually muzzled, whatever I said meant nothing. It had no weight. I was handcuffed and I was shackled. So I didn't have a choice but to follow that gut feeling. And let me just say, even also the relationships I developed with the individuals that people would refer to as underlings. Let me just say that those were like my angels. I never had to put my ear to a wall or to a door. They would come and tell me things. I didn't even seek them out. Some of them knew what was going on, but they didn't have any power to do anything, but they were keeping me informed. So those were other support systems that were actually in the workplace who, because I had these relationships with them, because I dealt with so many different people, and let me just say that I'm a type of person, I don't feel like anybody's better than anyone else. And so we had a mutual respect for each other. So I dealt with a myriad of people and that too. But like I said, my gut feeling, my instinct, it was just a feeling that I was obedient to. And because I really had no choice, I had to go with it, and it definitely worked for me.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. I think another important thing that you're pointing out is you had a very strong support system, both, within the workplace as well as at home. And I assume with that, obviously, you were able to communicate. You were communicating with them quite a lot so that they could help. But if we could talk about communication, how much is too much? What should you be saying to people when you're going through a very difficult time? And then, for those who are at home and not necessarily in the space that you're in during the day, what do you choose to tell them? Because sometimes they say you shouldn't say too much for whatever reason, and then for those people who are working with you, who are supporting you at work, how did you communicate with them? Where did you draw the line in terms of what you were telling them about what you're going through?
That's a really good question. And let me just say to you that there were I did initially, because I didn't know how to handle the situation, I was pretty much telling them everything that was going on. And then I was also looking for guidance, and I also wanted them to come to my aid. But then I had to realize, let me just say that, and I was never angry about it. I didn't want them to jeopardize their jobs. So I had to be real careful because they can get pulled into something that's my situation, and then they're penalized, and then that leads to them losing their jobs, and then they can't take care of themselves. But let me just say, initially I was telling them everything because I was just so shocked, and I didn't really have anybody to talk to on the job at that time before telling them that I spoke, like I said, I had relationships, but they weren't that deep. But I did share it with them because I felt like I was all alone, which I was. However, I realized when I would ask, like, for example, I had asked someone to come into a meeting with me to serve as a witness, because even when I had meetings, they were taking, all of my information and making it seem like it never happened and everything. And I wanted a witness, and she didn't feel comfortable with that. And then I came to the realization that this is my battle. And I don't want anybody to lose their employment because of my situation. So I was never angry with the individual. It's just that I didn't know. And it was my first time dealing with the situation. So I learned to understand. So now, let's say if I were to go through something similar now, I know not to involve people like that. And so it wasn't an expectation. I never got angry, like I said, but then I had to realize, but this was me traveling this journey. So I was learning. I had never been through anything like this before. So I think when it comes to telling people things, I think you have to be careful because, see, I tried to use every avenue. Let me just say, I didn't just go to individuals. I was going to different avenues within the institution, and they were no help. So it was like I said, I just felt like I was by myself. So it was almost like I was desperate. So, and when you're desperate, you do things that you probably wouldn't normally do, but this was not normal for me. So I learned through this process. So, yeah, so I think you want to be very careful with involving people. So then I realized instead of trying to involve them, maybe they could guide me and they would give me information as to where I could go and possibly get the help that I need. So you have to use people like that, not in the sense of that they're going to come to your aid and be a part of whatever the situation is.
May I?
Absolutely. Yes. No, please go ahead, Miss Paula.
One of the things that I've discovered, you asked the question, how do you know how much to communicate and actually who to communicate with? One of the things, and I don't know how I came about this, but this sort of manifested and it's been an ongoing for me, is that I communicate when I'm in the middle of trial and tribulations, I communicate on a need to know basis. And what does that mean? It means if the communication is not relevant to Dr. Gladys's point, of finding some help or some resolution or someone who is associated with the circumstance or situation, I don't communicate that at all. The first place that I go when I need to communicate, and I know it's going to sound hooky, is that I go to God first. I'm quiet. When stuff is happening and I don't know what to do with it, I don't know how to process it. Like the question you asked, you're in shock. So the first thing that I do is I go real quiet. I don't say anything. I'm quiet. And I start to, for me, I start to process the entire information internally. I don't know how I've developed this, but I, I developed it and so it's worked very well for me. So if you're in a circumstance and situation, you don't know who the players are, you don't really know what's going on, you're in shock, sit with that for a minute. Just sit with it for a minute and pay attention. Really listen to your inner instinct, to your gut, and pay attention around you before you start having conversations with anyone. It should be on a need to know basis. I hope this helps. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think it helps and it also confirms what Dr. Gladys was saying. But as Dr. Gladys was speaking, you realize also with the emotional resilience comes emotional maturity. So we may throw our toys out the cot and everybody knows what's going on with you simply because you're very, very upset when you're young or you're not as emotionally mature. But as you experience things, you learn. And I must say, Ms. Paula, to your point, I have a friend who always tells me to be still. I've known her for many, many, many years, and she always said, "Be still." And it doesn't matter where you are, you have to learn to be still. So my favorite place to do that is my mother's house, but that's far, that's far away. I can't go there every time I need to be still. So you have to learn to find a place where you can just be quiet. It's very difficult many of the times because, to Dr. Gladys's point, you're going through so much internal turmoil that you need an outlet somewhere. And so I think that, coupled with, thinking about what is it that I need to say, but then also recognizing that other people shouldn't necessarily be as involved because it might jeopardize their lives and their situation. So I think that's very important. Another thing that I wanted to repeat that Dr. Gladys said is writing down and keeping evidence of conversations that have been happening. It is so important. And, these are things that we don't give much attention to. But especially for our younger guests and listeners, it's something that's so critical. So keep those emails printed, etc., and have them handy because they will help you eventually. But yeah, no, I'd like to ask Dr. Kim. So, Miss Kim, it seems like you're about to go study for a PhD. I think you need to receive. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You've just put something up on the chat, which
Yeah.
you should comment on. But please, yeah, please say something about this, and then we can comment on what you've put on the chat.
Thank you. Thank you. I love all your shares. I'm learning a lot. I think it's a very deep and personal journey. And as we grow, oh, yeah, I've just grown. you know, as we mature, you tend to find like having been raised by parents who fostered a lot of confidence in me, my self-esteem. In my 20s and my 30s, I think my 20s and early 30s, I think I was pompous, of super assertive. Then, of course, life humbles you. So I used to deal with resilience in a different way, you know. And maybe those early years, we always had like when you already mentioned how you deal with it, I went like, how do you deal with it? And first thing is, I ran to mama. Anytime, anything, you hurt me, you affect me, you have road rage, you're mean to me, a phone call, my mom, this person is doing this and that, my dad. Then, of course, as you mature, you have to build other anchors. How do you deal with these? So, sadly, I mean, life calls for us to do that. You're here, you're an adult, you're managing a team, you have a team that looking up to you, and you're going through the storm, and there's still work to be done. So I've learned to build anchors. My life when I had to go through storm, like real storm, I grounded myself with a lot of anchors, which is very interesting. I remember one time I felt like I can't deal with it. I can't. And I have this thing of one of my anchors when I feel the weight of this world is literally on my shoulders. I love to drive. So I go on a long drive and I love wild animals. So we have a place called Kasane, and that is my escape. I'll drive to Kasane because from here it will take me like another five hours to get to where I'll start seeing elephants. And I think that's how I feel like the elephant is my spirit animal. And that just helps me unwind and calm down. And then that side, there are beautiful rivers, there are a lot of activities to do. So sometimes it's not always possible. I can't go so far, but I still drive within the city. I go for walks with my dogs. And it's funny and silly, but dogs really amuse me. Dogs, cats just crack me up. They'll do
Don't
something
forget
so
the
and
monkeys in your
monkeys
neighborhood.
too. You know, monkeys just, I mean, animals just get me happy. I can stop to watch a cow, especially a cow with a calf. I just find it so fascinating that you're just going through life, you're looking for grass, you're feeding, and you hear you're nurturing your baby. To me, it just centers me. Let me say nature just centers me. Then of course, I've also learned that I should always have friends that I can count on. So I have different friends that I approach for different issues. I think Dr. Gladys saw it. I was just going through it with my daughter doing her IB sometimes last year, and I wake up early morning and I call Dr. Gladys. What am I supposed to do with this now? Because I knew she could give sound advice as an educator. I've called Miss Paul so many times. Miss Paula, it can be anything with my personal life. Sometimes it's with business. This is not happening. Miss Judith knows when she gets my phone call and she just goes like she's going through it. So for me, that's therapy. You are my therapist. Sorry, I don't call you that officially, but that's therapy to me. My sisters as well, my siblings are my therapists. My mom was obviously my greatest anchor. So I think it's so important. I also, those days, I think I don't do it as much as I used to, but I used to read very deep books. I'm sure some of you have read the books like The Four Agreements. Those are books that I feel like don't sweat the small stuff. I also read books like Unbowed by Wangari Maathai, books of women who have gone through it and surmounted strong, be it a political situation, whatever they were going through. And that strengthens me. I feel like it helps me surmount stronger. Now, when it comes to the workplace, I make my staff know. 2 weeks ago, I was going through a horrible week. I think less than 2 weeks ago. And the first thing I did was I went to the office trying to look cheerful and warm because they don't need your bad energy. And I told them, you know what, guys, I need to be in and out for the next 3, 4 days. I have some personal issue I'm dealing with. and I may not be as attentive or as supportive as I would love to be. I feel it's very important when we communicate. I don't need to tell you what it is. But the minute I tell you I'm going through it, then you know, just get your kitten gloves for me. Just hold me. Just don't call me 24/7, like usually you would do with your staff. So I think just learning to get how do you deal, how get your team aware, get your support system. We all have that support system. Get your support system to rise up to the occasion and be there for you. Otherwise, so many times you call your friend, I'll call Miss Judith, and we end up laughing at the situation that was a mountain to me. She'll give me another perspective that I go like, what was I crying about? I mean, let me just move on with life. It's not that serious. And truly, it is never that serious. Otherwise, if it was that serious, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Kim. Yes, and
go ahead.
Go ahead, Miss Kim.
I just wanted to add something to that just occurred to me. I've been thinking as I was listening to Miss Kim speak and I was listening to Dr. Gladys, I was thinking how in my life resilience has become somewhat of an armor. Why do I say that? Because and I didn't realize all these years, all the stuff that I've been through, that I was actually building resilience. Today's Mother's Day. My daughter just left and she came to wish me a happy Mother's Day. And she said the strangest thing to me. She said, Mom, she said, I love you. She says, and I want to be like you when I grow up. She said, because it seems that no matter what happens, how bad things get, you always seem so calm. Like you deal with it in such a way. And it just occurred to me, like I had this epiphany just now, a little while ago, that said to me, yeah, that's the resilience armor. It is knowing that if you go through enough things in life, you start to, as you mature, you start to realize that those challenges in life is really a part of the life cycle, and that you can't just fall apart at any little thing that comes to you or any little thing that you experience. Resilience is like a muscle. The more you build it, you work with it, the stronger of an armor it becomes. It really helps you to withstand any storm in life. And I just wanted to share that piece of information I just got just a little while ago. Thank you all.
May I? Thank you, Miss Paula. And if we could stay with that for a little bit. And again, I go back to our young people. Just for me, it's the need to protect them. As much as I know that the experiences that you have in life, the adversities, etc., help to build that muscle. How can we help them build that muscle without having to go through all these horrible things that we've had to go through? And so I want us to stick to talk about that a little bit, and then also, but before we go into that, is to appreciate what Miss Kim was saying, especially what our parents do for us, because I believe some of those lessons and some of that building of the muscle comes exactly from what our parents have experienced, and as much as they want to shield us from their very bad, terrible experiences, sometimes they don't succeed. We see it because it's difficult to hide everything, right? But if we could go back to that question, Ms. Paula, you talked about building a muscle, okay? Some of us are maybe a little bit lazier than others, whereas some people are, very eager and go out and do whatever they need to do to build. What do we need to start doing now with our little ones? How do we help them build resilience? Currently in Southern Africa, in Botswana, where we are, we have a very high rate of suicide, especially suicide amongst men. And it's a going concern. We have to concern ourselves. But what is it that we can say to these young people about building that resilience? Because once you build that resilience, you won't think about taking your life. So if you can just talk about that for a few minutes. Thank you.
May I? I would like to discuss this because my son attempted to kill himself 3 times. This is the same young man that was born with sickle cell disease, so I could understand that. Let me tell you what I did. Again, this is all instinctual. One of the things that I realized was I have 4 children, and my children now, it's funny because the oldest one is 42, the youngest one is 37. And you think as a parent, as a mother especially, that once they get 18 and they leave and they have their lives and their family, parenting is done. I'm here to tell you it's not. So for my children, what I realized with my son was I needed to validate, I needed to help validate his emotion. What do I mean by that? When my son said to me at 13 that he was ready to die because he didn't want to live with this disease and it wasn't fair, instead of me trying to convince him that indeed it is fair and you just don't understand it, what I did was saying to him, I agreed with him. I was like, yeah, it isn't fair, right? And it isn't easy. So what are we going to do about it? I challenged him to think about the circumstance from a perspective of solution. I learned how to challenge him to find solutions to the challenges he was going through. I didn't know at the time I was helping him to build resilience because we knew we couldn't fix his circumstance. He was born like this. You know, for him to fall out on the floor and cry, screaming, I can't even touch him. Sickle cell is extreme pain. You can't even hug them. You can't touch them. Even their skin hurt. And because we couldn't cure any of that, the only thing that I could do was to help him think beyond the challenge and to think in terms of solution. What can we do? Is there anything else that we can do that can help the pain? Is there something else that we can do? And so for me, it was really about helping to guide his thought patterns. How he was dealing with the circumstance is what I'm trying to convey. You asked a question about our children. Instead of trying to shield them, because initially I thought the same way, I have to shield my children from all of the wickedness and the hurtful trials and tribulations in life. What I realize is shielding them is not the answer because that's a part of life. What we do is we inculcate in them the ability to look at life from a perspective of a student with a challenge. I know it sounds crazy. If we can begin to get our children to look at life and life's challenges as a student with a challenge in school, the school of life, right? And we help to guide how they see that and how they respond and deal with those circumstances is one way to help them build emotional, mental resilience. And the spiritual component is equally important. We never discuss this, but it's really the gorilla in the room. Because, and I'm not necessarily speaking religious, whatever your spirituality, however way that shows up is what it is, whether you're a Catholic, whether you're a Muslim, whether you believe in Jainism, it doesn't matter. It is how does that belief system help you cope with the challenges of life? And that's the spiritual component I'm speaking. Some people don't believe any of that. Yeah, thank you. I saw that I muted myself by accident. And so to help the children, to help our people around us is not to invalidate their suffering or marginalize it. It is to help guide them as parents and as social people in the social structure. It is to help our people look at their circumstances as an opportunity for growth. And I'll stop there. But that's an excellent question, Sister Yoda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. If I may just jump in here. Ms. Kim, please can you go back to the previous slide just for a moment? Because I wanted to ask Dr. Gladys something. Okay, I'm going to pass over the neuroplasticity. See, I can't even pronounce it. And I'm sure Dr. Gladys can speak to that. I wanted to get to the mindfulness one. And to ask Dr. Gladys, how much did you apply that during the time that you were experiencing those challenges in the workplace? How did you do it, and when did you do it? I think it's because it's such an important thing to do, but a lot of us feel that we just don't have time, especially those of us who are working. Thank you, Dr. Gladys.
And when you say mindfulness, what specifically are you speaking of?
The practice of mindfulness. So there's the breathing that you have to do. You have to pause, etc. So just that practice of applying mindfulness.
Yeah, that once I got over the shock, because when you think about, if you think about somebody who's going, they're grieving, right? There's a process you go through, okay? And let me just say that, initially, like I said, it was a shock. That's just a natural part of the process. And then, I have to decide, okay, at some point after I get over the shock, how am I going to deal with this? Okay. And then that's once I just made a decision that, okay, I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight. That's when the mindfulness comes in. Okay. Because at that point, I have to decide how I'm going to react to situations, how I'm going, and that's really responding, So that's where the mindfulness came in. And then I started paying attention to what was happening around me. I was paying attention to people's behavior, but like I said, that's not what I experienced initially. And to be honest with you, I don't think that most people do, because this is not something I saw coming. It just eventually evolved into this. And I had to get through those other stages first, and especially the shock. Okay. And then I had to, stop, like, you mentioned when, talking with people. Okay. I realized this was my battle. I was going to be in this battle alone. Yes, I did have a support system, but when I was on that job, I was by myself facing these individuals. Okay. So I had to think. So the mindfulness came in once I decided that I was going to fight regardless of what the outcome was. Even I was prepared that I probably would lose my job and get fired. But I said, okay, at least I can say I fought for my job. So that's when all of that came in. So, and it brought me to the point where I was just paying attention to people's behavior because I wanted to see what was coming next. I had an idea, like I said, it was that instinct, and I could tell by the behavior, for one, like at one point I was being called down into the office, with my supervisor, and I could tell that everybody was looking at the clock, like, oh, she's supposed to be in here. So apparently they were told that, oh, she's going to have a meeting with me at this particular time. So I could see exactly what was going on. So that's when the mindfulness came in. I already knew when I got my evaluation, I said, okay, I was not expecting a good evaluation. This person was trying to get rid of me. So why would I be thinking that she's going to give me a good evaluation? So also HR would be present. So that was something that I expected. So what I decided to do when I was reading my evaluation, in front of the party, I said, well, I would like to read this in private. And they were saying, well, you can read it right here. I said, no. And then when I went upstairs and I went to my office just to look it over, I said, what would I expect? So, I just came back down and said, I'll just rebut. So at that point, that's when the mindfulness had kicked in and I had decided how I was going to behave. And my main thing was that I was always calm. I was never unprofessional. And I'm so grateful for that. Where that came from, I'm not that type of person anyway, but when you're in a situation like that, you don't know how you're going to react. And I'm really proud of myself that I didn't react that way. I never got into it with any of the people that were involved, and I'm just really proud of myself that I was able to handle it that way because it was a very difficult time for me. So that's the point where the mindfulness came in, because there was also an expectation that nothing good was going to come from any of these individuals. So I knew that. So it had seeped in and it really marinated that, okay, this is what I'm dealing with and this is how I'm going to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. And then the next step, I really wanted to go through this with the slides that Miss Kim has provided, is gratitude. So when you're describing what you went through, Dr. Gladys, and then Miss Paula, with all those things that were happening to your son, how do you even remember to be grateful for anything? Because I can imagine that the emotions that you're going through, but gratitude is part of building resilience. And we know that. If you could maybe just talk to us a little bit about where does gratitude come in and how does it actually help? Miss Paula?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, Sister Yoda. That's an excellent question. One of the things that I think we forget when we're mired in challenges and confusion, it's very difficult because we're so focused on the problem that it's difficult to really look at the benefits of the problem. It sounds crazy. It sounds counterintuitive. For me, it was my saving grace. but my circumstance was different. I was in a position where my son could be gone any minute, just any minute. So every moment where he could smile, every moment when I saw him having a conversation with the nurses and advising them, every moment became a moment for celebration. Because in my circumstance, when you're living with the specter of death, of finality, you learn how to be grateful for every little morsel of blessing. And I found myself actually seeking that. What do I mean by that? I meant that the tougher things got, the more I began to look at, okay, this is happening for a reason. There's something I'm supposed to learn from this. What is the lesson? It fostered in me a sense of gratitude for the experience, because I would never be the person that I am today had I not gone through all of that with my son, had I not had these interactions with death every day. The doctor come in and tells me, your son will not live for the next 10 minutes. Please call your family. What do you do with that? What do you it's not like you can go and fix that. And so in that, you learn to just give thanks and praises. I remember when the doctor came in and said, we're working on him. And but we don't think he'll live past the next 10, 15 minutes. So please call your family. And I stood there and I looked at him, and the thought that came in my mind just as clear was, well, at least I've had the time I've had with him. And if it's time for him to go, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? So that's where the gratitude comes in. It's making a conscious effort and decision to really look for the positivity in the trials and tribulations. My grandmother used to say, within every misfortune lies the seed of a blessing. It's a spiritual rule. That's how it works. So, yeah. So I just want to leave us with that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm up, Miss Yodet. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Gladys. Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So where I found the gratitude, first of all, I was very grateful I didn't lose my job and that I stayed in it and to see what the end result was. That was definitely, that's, a no brainer. I was so grateful that I was able to, because I went through a lot. I really felt like I was walking through the fire, and I was. And I really was so grateful that I had the strength to hang in there, because I'm telling you, initially I really wanted to just quit. It was very difficult. So I was grateful for that I did do that. I didn't lose my job. And I was also grateful that the fact that I was dealing with, I felt like God had given me an assignment, that this was a diabolical individual, and she has done this to so many other people, and they may not have been in a position to go against her. And not that I was, but it's just that when I say that, I never gave her any ammunition. So a lot of times, like I said, people lose their jobs because they don't show up on time. So she didn't have that with me. So the things that she was looking for, she couldn't find that in me. So she had to make up stuff. So I found gratitude in that as well, because I said, wow, hopefully she won't do this again, because I don't care how long you can continue to do something like that. Eventually, you're going to find somebody who's going to be your match. Maybe not on the same level as far as status, but I was in a situation where she was my superior, but I was still able to take her down. So I found gratitude in that. And that's not, and I'm not saying that to be pompous or anything like that, but I really feel like I was just used for this particular time because I had done nothing wrong. And when you don't do anything wrong, what else can you think is that you're being used as a tool for this particular situation to remove that individual? Now, like I said, that wasn't the initial thought, but when I look back at it, and then it also taught me about people. Because I would have never thought that these people would come together against me and probably against anyone else. But what it is that people do things, and it could be based on the circumstances at that time. Maybe, like I said, I know for a fact that she had offered, promotions to individuals, and it just goes to show you. That's why you have to be careful in the workplace. And I think when it comes to the workplace, what I've learned, which I've pretty much always done, is you go there and you do your job. Don't have any expectations of your colleagues or coworkers. Just do your job, do it to the best of your ability, and leave it right there. Because if you start having expectation, because let me tell you, it could be me today, it could be you tomorrow. Okay. And that's one thing I learned. So I'm grateful for the experience, although it was very challenging, it was tough, and it was very hard. And then another thing I got from it, I'm grateful that if I come across someone else who's having this experience, I can guide them. Like I could say, make sure you're on time. Make sure you do your job. You know what I mean? Be respectful. You see what I'm saying? Because there were numerous things that, I had experienced. And like I told you, I know that they were instinctual. And I'm so grateful because I could see that there was something else working in this environment because it was them against just me. And like they say, if you're in large numbers, more than likely you are going to be victorious. And it just wasn't the case. So I am definitely a testimony to if you do what you're supposed to do. And it doesn't always work like that for everyone. But like I said, but if you do what you're supposed to do, there's not really much that they can really, get on you. And that's what they were trying to do, accumulate a record. And it just didn't work out because it wasn't there. It wasn't there, you know? So yeah, so that's what I'm
Um,
grateful for.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. The more you tell us about your experience, you wonder what makes human beings behave in a way that's just mind-boggling. I don't understand that about humans and why it's necessary to do things where you get to the extent where you're making stuff up in order to get rid of somebody. It's a terrible thing, but we do have human beings like that. And I think the lessons that you're sharing this afternoon, this evening, is so important for those who are still in workplaces where there are people like that. And I think one of the important things that you said, and it's a quote, if I may, from your chapter, you'll forgive me for this, but I saw it, and you say, develop wholesome relationships built on character. So, in other words, to your point, you need to do your work, put your head down and do your work. Don't try and, okay, I can't use that expression here, but don't lick people's boots. Let me put it that
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So you have to show people that you are somebody with integrity, that you're honest, you're hardworking, and you're going to do what you have to do. You're not going to
that's
make
it.
by or get by developing relationships with the CEO
exactly,
or whatever the case may be. So no, I do
exactly.
appreciate that. And I think, to Miss Paula's comments, it takes, I know people who are deeply spiritual, and I think of my aunts, deeply spiritual people who will find a reason for gratitude in everything. But sometimes it's very, very difficult to be grateful when you're going through so much. And when you meet people who are like that, you kind of have to make sure that you stay close to them somehow, even if you're reaching out to them every month or whatever it is, because they're constantly showing you light. And
Yeah,
for that reason, going to your support networks, it's so important to have that person in your life that, regardless of what they themselves are experiencing, are able to show you that, or remind you that the sun will come out the next day and that things will get better. That gratitude that not all of us are able to express. No, thank you
yeah.
so much for those comments. Miss Kim, you can now move to the next slide. I know that our time is not on our side, but we're having such a wonderful conversation. I don't know if there are any comments, Miss Kim, that you want us to address from the other pages that you may be on. I'm not sure if I can hand over to you for a moment.
Well, I'm just loving the conversation. It's so rich. It speaks so deep to a lot of issues we're encountering. And when you talk about, we can see how mental health has gone. I mean, suicide is becoming an everyday thing. And that's where you think about, if we can get more people listening to these kind of conversations, coming and being able to share. You mentioned things that I like when I listen to Miss Paula saying, my child, I mean, the doctor is telling me 10 minutes. I just go like, how do you keep walking? How did
Mhm.
you go through that? Yesterday I had a day of reflection. That was my birthday. And I think for me, it was a day of gratitude, deep, deep gratitude. And I keep feeling, every time I feel like this is a lot, I always go back to, how did my mom survive child loss? You know, we lost my brother. And for me, I feel like of all the things we might go through in life, I don't know how moms deal with losing a child. It must be the most difficult thing to a mom. And of course, previously, before I lost my mom, I didn't know if I was going to survive. My mom is gone, and it was very difficult. And yes, I was an adult. I was an
Yeah.
old grown woman. It's actually 4 years ago, but it was so difficult. So now, I think as you talk about Dr. Gladys, when you speak about your experience and you still have to face these people and be strong and be calm, especially that thing of
Yeah.
being calm,
Yeah.
it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So, and that's where you want to understand. It calls maybe having those another guardian angel that we don't unforeseen, because how do you keep calm and you're still grateful in the storm? You still see light in the storm. You still have a reason to go, like, because gratitude will be so important as we go through storm, and there's always light in it. There's always something. I have a lot of questions. I'll spare them. I just hope someday there'll be another part two, because I still question. Yes, I appreciate this built me. This made me a better human, but did I have to go through that? And still, how do I recover what I lost? Because I'm still wounded. Yes, it's a journey. Every day I'm getting better, but it can't be easy. And maybe
I think you
Kim,
should, I
uh-huh.
think you
sorry.
should ask your questions, Miss Kim, because I mean, for me, the question that keeps coming back, if I can jump into your throat, as they say here, is you're going through it, and Dr. Gladys is going to work every day. She continues to deliver what she's supposed to deliver every day. Nothing is going to stop her from doing that, but she still has to face
Yeah.
these humans who have horrible intentions, right?
Yeah.
Miss Paula has to every day wake up knowing what she knows about what her son is experiencing and still able to find moments of gratitude. So, and I don't know if we can pin it down, but for me, it's so important for us to at least say, what is it that you do? You know, I remember the other day, Miss Kim, when you went through a very difficult time. And I was so proud that I was able to remember that, because a couple of years ago, if you said to me, Yodi, just pause, breathe, reflect, I'd be like, what do you mean pause, breathe, reflect? I'm going through so much right now. I don't have time to pause and breathe and reflect, right? I must say that my father, who's passed away now 5 years ago, he was the one person who would force me every time I complained about anything. He would force me to look that mirror, look, what is it? How did you contribute to the situation? So my father forced me to reflect. But our young people are are not patient. They just somehow bulldoze themselves through life. Some of them will be okay, others will be walking wounded, as they say, but they still carry on. They don't seem to have, and if anybody young is online and you want to tell me I'm so wrong, please do, but they don't seem to have the resilience that our parents have. And I worry about them a lot. So what is it that you are all able to share? What is it that you did? Whether it's exercising what is it that you did to get through those times and those moments? Just if you could, and Miss Paula, I asked you to please share that your mother's quote in the public chat so that others can see it as
Oh,
well. What is
okay.
it that, yeah, what are the lessons that we can leave for young people and older people? Because there's some folks who are just struggling. It actually doesn't really matter how old you are, but I think our young ones are faced with more um, mental health issues, and that's what we seem to be going back to, mental health issues. Please, can you help me drop some very good golden nuggets, as you all like to call them, for our young people? Thank you.
Yes. Um, so another excellent question, Sister Yo. You know what's missing? You know what I realized it's missing as I travel the world? Our young people have been disconnected from an internal value system. What do I mean by that? I mean that We live under a global system that forces us to focus externally. It's all the outside stuff. I want this. I want to do that. I got to do this. We tell them you can be anything that you want to be. You have the right to do this. How many of us actually, and this is not about judgment, this is an honest question. How many of us really interact with our children to the degree that we nurture in them a value system that anchors them? Because if we're not preparing them for the storm that's coming at them, they're going to be washed away. Like a tsunami just washes people away. This is what's going on. This is all this behavioral health and mental health circumstances and situation is because we're not anchored. We weren't prepared to live in a world that's moving so fast past us, that's changing so rapidly, that things are evolving so fast that you have to be anchored to withstand the storm. I live in Belize where we have hurricanes, and hurricane season is about to begin in June. And do you know what we should spend time doing when it's a dry season? Straightening up our houses, anchoring everything down, nailing everything down so it can withstand the storm. It is the same thing with human beings. In fact, I would argue it's even more important with human beings. So this resilience conversation is important, but it's nothing if it's not based on internal values. Who are you? What is important? What is good to you and for you? Because everything that's good to you is not necessarily good for you. What do we put our time and attention in? These are the kinds of conversations we need to be having with our children, with our grandchildren, with our neighbors, because I think it really forces us to now become mindful, to change our mindset, right? That's how we start to become appreciative. For me, it was realizing that life is a school, that all that I'm going through, there's a lesson in this. When I look back at everything that I've gone through, I've learned so much from it. It's helped to build my resistance, my resilience, my well-being. So I think that's the key to nurture in our people, in our children. If you're an instructor, whatever it is you're doing, we have to have a value system to anchor you, to hold you in place in a good way, something that you can grow into, so that no matter what the vicissitudes of life is, no matter what the trials and tribulations are, you can stand your ground and know that Spirit's got you. It's all good. That at the end of this, you're going to be okay. You're going to be stronger and better for it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Okay.
Dr. Gladys?
Yeah, I do want to say one thing that you were asking, and I'll get back to your question, but you had mentioned something about what do you do because you have to face these people. I do want to mention too, that was really, really difficult for me. And let me tell you how my instincts kicked in. I usually would get to work around 7:30 in the morning, a little before 7:30 because I had to be there by 7:30. So, I like getting in early because then you don't have any interruptions. You can really get things done. And I remember, it was very difficult facing these people. And I would sort of like, I was the lab supervisor at the time. And it was like a Jack and Jill setup where there was a room in the middle, and then there's two rooms on the outside, and there's doors that you can go into the prep room from either side. And usually, I'll be honest with you, there were times when I would hide. I really didn't want to face anybody. But one morning, and it was about 8 a.m. So this individual knew that I would be there because I was always on time. But let me tell you what she did. She probably knew I would also be hiding out. But something told me to stay in that prep room. And I stayed. And let me tell you what happened. She had a police officer with her, and what she was going to do was say, no, I have proof that she was not in this space. Now, I could have said, no, I was in one of the other labs, but she was going to have someone there to verify that they did not see me. But because I stayed there, the officer just turned around and left. And they were just shocked. I could see by the expression that I was there, because normally I would have been hiding out because it was difficult facing these people. But my instincts told me that particular day, stay right there. Don't move. And I stayed there. So there was nothing to confirm that she was saying. Yes. So I just wanted to mention that. Now, when you mentioned also about the youth, one thing, I work with, I work with the full gamut, mainly, I teach college, of course, but what I find is that, like what Miss Paula was saying, a value system. And let me just say this, when you mention the value system, what I've learned is, because of what I'm seeing with the youth today, I don't actually fit. I consider myself to be old school because I do have a value system. So there's a conflict there. So, but what I've decided was that no, I'm not going to change my value system to meet you. You're going to have to step up to my value system. And let me say, and where I see it is where there's no accountability. Nobody wants to take accountability for what they do. Also, a lack of respect. That's another thing that's prevalent. And then what I'm finding is that these students just don't have coping skills. Now, where this is coming from, I don't know, like Miss Paula was saying, the world, and I'm paraphrasing, is evolving. We have social media. I'm thinking, because I don't want to say that every parent is not providing these values. So it has to be coming from somewhere. So I want to throw it there. And especially on Mother's Day, I don't want to accuse anyone, any mothers, of not, doing what they're supposed to do. But that's what I'm encountering. But I'm not compromising my value system, to meet them. They need to come up. Somebody has to make them accountable. And that's what I find myself doing. And I had to realize that. And I had to say, no, what they're doing is not right. And then I'm not going to conform to their way. As long as you're in my environment, you're going to have to conform to mine. So I totally agree with what Ms. Paul is saying. There's something going on there.
And I really like what you said, Dr. Gladys. It's the not just the reluctance, but you're absolutely refusing to compromise your values. I'm the same way. And my children know that, their friends know that. There's certain things that I will not compromise, and I will not compromise my values, which brings us to another subject, maybe for another day, and that is the peer pressure that exists amongst parents to compromise your values, so where you overspend when you shouldn't be because you simply cannot afford, but you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Therefore, you do the things that you really shouldn't be doing. So there's that peer pressure as well. I mean, I know certainly we feel it here. I'm assuming it would be the same in the US as well. So meet me halfway is a good one. But we also, I think, just reflecting on our current situation, the world is evolving, but we also know that we live in environments and communities where we have a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, mothers who are struggling to raise their children on their own. The family unit has broken down in many instances. We do not have, the village. That's that old expression, it takes a village to raise a child. Our villages have broken down for the most part, especially if you're living in the cities. And so, a mother will wake up early in the morning to go to work. Her children have to find themselves breakfast and go to school on their own. She comes back late at night. And so there's nobody in between to see to what they're doing and to mold them the way we used to be molded. So I think times have changed so drastically. So the question now becomes, how do we do that in the broken communities that we're living in? And I know that there are lots of people who've got amazing programs. I know all of you are working on programs that deal with young people and trying to address different challenges. But that is a conversation for another day. So, Miss Kim, what are some of the nuggets from your experience? You've walked a very different journey. You've been an entrepreneur most of your life. You refuse to be employed, and I love that about you. Something that I need to learn from myself. But what is it that you've picked up in some of the most difficult times? What would you share with your own children, but also with the young people that you work with? What are your golden nuggets?
Thank you, Miss Judith. And you've all shared all the gems that we need, especially on why are we here, which is so important that we all take accountability and accept, because truly, we may not take the entire blame, but as a society and as parents, we have failed. We've failed. We helicopter our kids. We're scared of getting them to fail. We also forget that this is a different era where the social media, which shows them quick gratification and also shows them the Jones are better than us because they drive a better car and the peer pressure comes in. And then also, it's interesting. We're supposed to be more connected because of the digital era, but we are more disconnected. We hardly get to know what our kids are doing because we go out for dinner and everybody's on their phone because they have to catch up on their social media things. And that is where parenting, where those value systems Sunday lunch, it's compulsory. Sitting on the table at the dinner table and no phones, it's compulsory. Getting the, which is literally, I mean, how nice. I'm talking about lunch, and you still have to make it like reinforce it and insist and put your foot down. And this is just you trying to parent. You want them to talk, you want to get to know them. Then we think the quick fix is money. So the minute you can't connect with them, there's a maid that raises them, there's a driver that takes them shopping, and then we're trying to overcompensate, thinking that because we want them to grow, to have a better life than we had, just because we walked to school with our grandmothers, who are our anchors, who nurtured us, who taught us the value of hard work. But now we want to look at it like that was not cool, right? So we want them to have a soft life. We don't want them to wash our cars. Well, at least as it was actually going to the farm, hard labor, we might call it. Right now, you tell our kids to do that, that's punishment. So let's look at solutions, and one of the things we can do. This is collectively. And some of those things I'm mentioning, like just insisting. We are the Kims. I always tell my children, don't pick on what, even my sisters, my siblings, my friends, they have their family culture, their traditions. So when you tell me you're going to do that, we do not do that as the Kim's family. That is not part of who we are. And reinforcing that and insisting and upholding that culture. Allow me to digress a little bit. On LinkedIn, yesterday I posted about my I was very grateful, things I'm happy about, turning 50 is quite a milestone. And then I mentioned how the day that I was born, my father couldn't be there because rushed to go see my grandmother who was dying. So my grandmother died as soon as I was born. But according to our naming system, I wasn't named after my great grandmother because she died. That's not how we name. We have a beautiful pattern that I adore, our naming system, which I've been trying to preach to my kids. It doesn't make sense to them. They're just wondering, what should I call? You're supposed to name me as your first child. So my last born daughter is always like, why should I call my child Sally? And I'm like, because I also named you after my mother. That's the tradition. That's the culture. That's how we roll. But then you understand it's something that you really have to go deeper, which also when they put such value systems and such traditions, those grandparents or those parents of those people of those days, they didn't have a lot of social ills or weird behaviors. Now we have mothers that some people wouldn't want to name, which is very, very sad. So I had somebody who commented on LinkedIn saying that what is wrong with your parents? How could they name you after your great grandmother? And I mean, like, how lost are we as humans? How dare you question my parents? But I mean, here's the thing. So we live in this digital world, and we also live in this world with people who think you have, how do you question my culture? What do you know about me? Right? But I mean, that's how people are. So maybe back to when Miss Yodit is asking, how are humans? Why would people do that? Yeah, people are capable of doing all sorts of things. So our children as well, they're interacting with people from different worlds. So they feel like our culture, our norm, how we do things doesn't count because the Joneses do that and it's okay with them. Without the clear understanding, why do they do that? Why are they of that culture? So now, looking at things that we really need to do to harness that, one of the things that really, really speaks volumes to me is building soft skills in our children. Can they learn and accept, fail fast, fail forward? We as parents, we need to stop babysitting them. Let's allow them to fail so that they can build the muscle of problem solving. So let them understand, how do I get myself out of this situation when things just go, when the storm comes? Creativity, that's so important. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, adaptability. Now, to an extent, since we helicopter and we don't parent as we used to, we don't even meet our kids, this goes to schools where now these are becoming subjects. It's becoming the most sought after skill, just getting your soft skills, your emotional intelligence. How do you get yourself out of a situation? So it's not as easy as it sounds, but collectively, if we can learn to keep on teaching them coping skills, and we also create safe spaces for them to talk, for them to express themselves, We try as much as we can, like just dropping kids to school. Sometimes for me, it's very personal, it's intentional. Within that journey, it's 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, you will tell me something. Because as we drive, I think that thing of, we are always told, if you really want someone to talk to you, do a drive, because they're not facing you, and you don't make it very intentional that I'm dropping you to school so that you can tell me about the bullying that's going on at school. So obviously, making sure that also they're relating with their aunties, or there's a mentor somewhere. These days, aunties do not have to be birth aunties. We've created this relationship that we also teach our children. It is so important. There always has to be somebody that you can count on, that you can talk to. You can pick the phone and call Miss Paula and tell her how you're not coping with this and that. She understands that world. Dr. Gladys, very good mentor when you're stuck with career choices. And you find sometimes they're able to tell you what they cannot tell me. So we need to build, there's work to be done. Slowly we're going to get there. Connecting them with their communities, very important. Take them to their aunties. Right now, my daughter is finishing school. I want to make sure she goes to Kenya for a month. Go to your roots. Go sit with your grandfather. Listen, learn from them. Appreciate hard work where people wake up at 6 to go to the farm. Meet, get a different perspective. So we're humans, and it's not easy, but we're getting there, and we will get there, and we will be fine, and our children will be fine. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Kim. And thank you, Ms. Paula and Dr. Gladys, for all of those nuggets. I think one of the things that I appreciate about this is we keep coming back to the fact that it will be well, that we have to continue this journey, and emotional resilience helps you to continue with this journey. It's the steps on how to build it that we've been exploring, and touching upon, lives within the work, our lives within the working place, as well as life, our private lives. So it's a lot to take in, a lot to think about, but it's been such a wonderful conversation. I think I'm still learning. I think the past couple of years have allowed me that time and the space to pause and breathe and reflect. It's such an important thing to do. And in some instances, Ms. Kim, I feel that our children are better human beings than some of the so-called adults that I know and that I have come across. Like Dr. Gladys, some of those people, you don't know how and what happened to them for them to become that type of human. But our children, there's a certain resilience that they have, as much as they are still learning and they'd rather take the shortcuts. They don't want to go through pain. They're very clear, and I admire them for that. I just don't like them thinking that suicide is the answer. But there is a lot that we can also learn from them. So perhaps conversations need to happen with them, not just within the home, but even within this forum. So I don't know if at some point we can invite a couple of young people to join us in these conversations so we can hear from them directly and they challenge us. Dr. Gladys talked about our good old values. Maybe for them, those values are overstated, but maybe we need to hear from them and to see how we can reach a consensus on some things. I don't know. But if I may at this point hand back over to Dr. Gladys, who started us this afternoon. I can see that we are 1 minute away from ending. So Dr. Gladys, may I hand over to you at this point? Thank you.
Sure. Yes. The only thing I would like to leave everyone with is that you have to develop coping skills and find mental strength when sometimes it feels like it's not there. Like I said, it was very challenging, but I do find I'm very grateful for the experience, and I'm glad I made it through. It's not easy, it's not it's really so so I just want to say again happy Mother's Day to everyone, and thank you for those who joined us. So I'll pass the mic to Miss Paula.
What can I say? I give thanks and praises for everything in my life, because I believe that I have something to do with the outcomes in my life, either directly or indirectly. Because I believe that, I'm very mindful about the way that I treat other people. How do I treat myself? And how do I show up in the world? Taking responsibility is important. Owning my stuff is important, and being big enough to say, listen, I made a mistake, I'm wrong. That's equally important. All of these things are necessary in building resilience, whether it's emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual. All of that is important, and all of it is needed in order to be successful in this age of change. So thank you. I thank the panelists so much, and I thank the team for having this discussion, because I think it has so much value. The gravity is pretty heavy. So as you go through your day, as you're doing whatever it is you're doing and you're living your life, remember to find something to be grateful for. Take an opportunity to be able to be of service to someone. If you can help. If it's not killing you, taxing your pockets, and if you can do it, do it. It won't hurt. Pay it forward, so that we can all become whole and healthy individuals, and that we can pass that along to our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. I thank you all so much. I hope you have a most beautiful and auspicious week. Pass the mic to Miss Yodit.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Just apart from saying thank you to everybody who joined us today, and happy Mother's Day to all our wonderful mothers out there, those who are sitting in heaven and those who are still with us. We think about them and we appreciate them deeply. I'm very grateful for this conversation that I am. I'm grateful that we continue having these conversations every Sunday. It's inspiring in a lot of ways. And as much as we sit together as the Happiness Tribe at least once a week, this podcast just somehow makes it even better. I appreciate more the fact that I have this tribe, and I really do appreciate all of you. Your experiences teach us so much, and I'm grateful for that, for your time. Thank you very much, Miss Kim. And we forgot to wish Miss Kim a happy birthday. We wished happy birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Miss Kim. I know you had a fantastic day. I still don't know why they say welcome to the fifth floor. Like as the floors get higher and higher. Where are we going? I don't get it, but welcome to the fifth floor. So over to you, my darling Miss Kim.
Happy birthday, Miss Kim.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
Thank you. I think it's the magnitude of hello, wake up. This is fifth floor. It's it's quite something. It's quite a milestone. I'm grateful. I am so grateful. And I'm so grateful for the Happiness Tribe. You teach me every day. This is just cool. I'm learning. And sometimes we think therapy is when we have to sit in front of a shrink, but I think we all shrink each other in one way or the other. And I strongly believe we are helping many other people out there. Every day, somebody comes in and sends a message saying, I learned a lot, I learned something. And of course, it remains on our YouTube channels. People can always revisit and see what we spoke about, our Facebook and our LinkedIn as well. We appreciate you all, our listeners. This wouldn't be without you. We're here to learn from each other. We don't walk in claiming to have the blueprint of living life. We're all here making mistakes as we get by. As long as we can hold each other, you're welcome. Please let us know if you would like to join our podcast. We're going to be discussing all the series for this book the next few weeks. And it's going to be a fantastic time when it's literally where we're encountering just what we go through in life and how can we resolve it? How can we be better? Resilience is not something you're born with. It's something that you learn. And sometimes we don't have spaces that create enabling environments for us to learn to be resilient. And that's one of the things I try to look at when I meet difficult people. Like right now, we have two very, very difficult presidents. I'm not going to be political, I promise. People that every day you wake up and you go like, how do we live with these two people in this world? And for me, when I decided I'm not going to allow these people to annoy me anymore, I tried to see them as little children when they were born, pure, nice, innocent. And then they encountered life, and life showed them something different. Because I feel like that's my safety haven. And it's the same thing I do when I have difficult people to encounter or to deal with. I try to see the innocent child, that something happened along the way. And I think that's my way of being compassionate with people who you just go like, I don't know how to deal with you, but let me treat you as a human being. Because I mean, it takes a lot sometimes. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, our listeners. And looking forward to seeing you next Sunday. Same place, same time. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.